Okay, as I promised, we will start the review for semester one in world history. And we're going to go back to geography foundations and early civilizations. And that'll be the first card on the flip cards I gave you, the 4x6 index cards that I provided last week. We started talking about BAP. How about map basics? Map basics, the compass, what directions are where, the scale, how you read a scale on a map using a ruler, an inch equals 100 miles, or whatever information that is given you on the map, and how to use that. And another thing I want you to make you aware of, and you'll probably see some of these references on the final itself, where they talk about different regions across the world. And you need to be familiar with the basics of world geography in terms of where the Americas are, where Europe is, Asia, Africa, and like that. And also the way regions, geographic regions, align with points on the compass. Like Southeast Asia, which would be Vietnam, that area there. Um, Western Asia would be the Holy Land, Palestine, places like that. And just kind of be familiar with that. And what you want to do is when you're not sure, when you're there's a question about a region, is just slow down, look at the compass on the map, and try to figure it out from there. Okay, and usually that works when you take your time and you slow it down. You'll do all right. Uh, the semester started out even before we started talking about the first civilizations. There was a big leap in human development, and that was when we had the agricultural revolution. Prior to that time, people were subsisting on a day-to-day basis. The quest on a daily basis was food, food, food. With the agricultural revolution, that changes radically because somebody discovers somewhere, probably in the Middle East, that hey, these seeds, they seem to grow each year, and maybe we could stick around in one place and grow crops, and we might ensure our ability to survive from year to year. That really takes off, that whole idea. Some historians argue that it's like the most important development that's ever occurred in human history. I don't know. I'll leave that up to them to discover. So we go from being hunter-gatherers to being people concerned with agriculture. When they're hunter-gatherers, they were organized into tribal organizations. There's no large-scale societies, and definitely no large-scale cities or nations or anything like that. And this is the pre-agricultural area. Remember, it's hunting gatherers. Food is the day-to-day concern. With the Neolithic or the agricultural revolution, as I said earlier, that changes everything. It's about 8,000 years ago that occurs. And we start getting development of more complex economic and social systems. Um, Something's existing that has not existed previously to the agricultural revolution. That kind of leads us off to the first start of the year. We did that. Then we looked at river valley civilizations just to keep the progression going on how civilizations developed. And there were a lot of benefits to living in a river valley. And we talked about some of those, water supply, food supply, good area of soil to grow crops on, because remember, we're an agricultural people at this point in time. So river valley civilizations really take off. You have the civilization in Egypt that occurs in a river valley. You have the Fertile Crescent. Remember, that's Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates. You have a river valley civilization that occurs in India. And of course, you have the river valley civilization that occurs in Asia. and the Yellow River Valley civilization. So this agricultural revolution, that's a good way to describe it too, because it is a revolution. It changes everything. It provides lifestyle changes too. And probably the most important thing that comes from these agricultural revolution, river valley civilizations, is there's food surpluses. And food surpluses lead to a lot of good things in terms of the progression and the growth of humanity. You have specialization of labor. People don't just need to be concerned all the time about where am I getting my food? Do you have the food? Let's go look for the food together. It's like, no, some people's job is to grow the food. Others people's job is to create vessels we can put the food in. Some people transport the food. So it's a radical departure, as I mentioned before. Society becomes stratified. Remember, you have the pyramid, and you have people at the top of the pyramid and people at the bottom of the pyramid. And so that is an important thing to think about also, where you have different segments of society. You have increased trade, because if there's a food surplus, you can start going, and I kind of mentioned this in class, you can trade certain items for, hey, you know, I got this pig, it's a nice pig. You want to buy this pig? This is what it'll cost you. It costs you a few bags of grain. And so we start getting just the start of trade networks at a real basic fundamental level. We also start getting complex government systems where with this increased food surplus, you start having people, and their job is to help the society function as smooth as possible. And they're not out in the fields, or they're not making vessels to put grain in or creating irrigation ditches, but they're just helping run society. And that's the start of government systems. We also have religious systems that start occurring. We're going to talk a little more later on about the nature of religion. And during that time, we'll get a little more in depth of that. But there are people in these societies, because the society starts becoming stratified, and people in these societies, and part of their job is to, they serve a religious function. And their religious function is to do certain rituals that people in these societies feel are important in order for their society to be productive, to be successful, and to ensure favor of the gods. We also get increased population. Basic math: more food, more babies, more babies, more food. Easy. Then we get increased urbanization. That means that people aren't living in these small tribal bands anymore. They start living in small villages first, and then these small villages get bigger and turn into settlements. And these settlements, you know, continue to grow and grow. And they don't develop cities as big as we have in the modern era, but you know, a settlement with 20 or 30,000 people then would have been quite large, and still takes a certain amount of social engineering and logistics to have that many people living in one place and getting along okay. And we also get record keeping, because one of the first things that happens is when government is established, you start getting record keeping, which is taxes. Now remember, the people at the top of the pyramid, up here, they start charging the people that are down here. They start charging those people taxes because they want to help the government function. And they need money to do that, so they're going to start taxing people. People that serve religious functions are also going to tax the people in the lower classes, because you know they got to eat too. So they figured that, you know, taxes will work for them also. These people in these new settlements, they're going to need armies, armed forces. Some people, specialization of labor, their job is to make weapons and armor and so forth, basic armor. And as a result, you're going to start getting armies. And these armies are to protect these settlements, because it's kind of precarious. There's not a lot of laws that are in existence. And as a result, some people take what they want, and you have to have the ability back then to protect you and yours from harm. So armies exist back then. From that, we talk about the Greek city-states. Those are the first like classical civilization we look at. We look at other ones too, but we spent some time on the Greeks. And the Greeks are important for a lot of reasons. The most prevalent ones I'm going to mention that I feel may show up on the final are they called the Greek city-states polis, excuse me, Polis. And these Greek city-states were very independent, and some of that was due to the geography of Greece. It's very mountainous. It wasn't a river valley civilization. Mountainous islands. So these city-states, these polis, develop independently of one another, and as a result, they feel very independent, and they think that they have the best idea in terms of how they should run things and what they should think and what they should put their efforts towards. So that's an important thing to do. The two main city-states that we talk about are Athens and Sparta. Athens is known for its culture, its education, its democracy. Athens is the first government unit that people attribute democracy to. Different form of democracy. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And then we have Sparta. Sparta is not a democracy. Sparta is known as a very pragmatic Greek city-state and very strong militarily. They are a force to be reckoned with, as is Athens. Athens is not known as a strong military state, but they do have a certain amount of military power, mostly in their naval power. So you have, on one hand, you have Athens is the naval power, and on the other hand, you have Sparta, which is the land-based military power. So they're going to come into contact, and sometimes they clash, but interesting enough, sometimes they combine together. They're pretty tough then when they do that. They're able to fight off the Persians a couple times, as you know. Okay, I said we're going to talk about governments. Let's do that. The main government we're going to talk about first is a monarchy. Now, a monarchy is a form of government where power is in the hands of a single person, okay, king or queen. That's a monarchy. It's used, the power is usually passed down through one of their offspring, be it a son, usually a son back in the ancient world, or if there is no son, then it will go to a daughter. And that's not completely unheard of. There's been a lot of famous female monarchs. The next form of government is an aristocracy. Aristocracy is a form of government in which power is in the hands of a ruling class, a hereditary ruling class, or nobility. Like if there's a certain family that seems to be in power all the time, that would be an aristocracy. Or, they always pick their rulers out of 4 or 5 families. That would definitely be an aristocracy. The next form of government is a funny sounding one, and it's called an oligarchy. Now, an oligarchy is a government in which the power is in the hands of very few people. And usually it's completely based on wealth. If you're not wealthy, you're not a ruler, and that's what an oligarchy would be. The next form of government, I'm flipping the pages here, is flip the wrong page. A republic. Republic we're familiar with. Every morning at Franklin, we do the Pledge of Allegiance, and one of the lines deals with a republic. Well, a republic is a form of government in which power is in the hands of representatives and leaders that are picked by the citizens of that nation or people that are governed by that type of government. And that's what a republic is. Next thing to mention about the Greeks and why they are still, we still talk about them, is the philosophers. We have Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates is the questioning guy. He's always seeking wisdom, as all the philosophers are, and he's always asking why. Socrates and his disciple Plato, they believe that the first question you should ask at all times is why. And I know some of the teachers at Franklin do the Platonic method, Socratic method, excuse me, when it comes to investigating certain things where, you know, everything's a question. That way you can gauge somebody's understanding by their ability to answer the question why. And then we have Aristotle also. Now he joins Plato's Academy. Now the Greek philosophers, they focus on math and science mostly, and that's a big reason why we still study them. They emphasize logic, empirical observation or observing with your senses, and the nature of political power and hierarchy. I mean, those are things we still talk about now, not just during election season, excuse me. We talk about, you know, why are certain people in political power and why aren't certain people in political power. So it's, you know, it's a topic that is still of interest to us today. Hellenism is an important concept you need to know about the Greeks, and kind of taking a leap ahead here in Greek history. But the main reason, or the main spreader of Hellenism, is Alexander the Great, the guy we talked about earlier. He was pretty fantastic. Some people say, oh, he was not fantastic. He was a butcher and he killed a lot of people. And they're probably right. He probably did. That's the way of the world back then. But he did spread Greek culture throughout the Mediterranean world. And that's Hellenism. It's like a fusion, a combination of Greek ideas and local ideas, and they create like a whole new culture, which was called Hellenism. Greek contributions to other civilizations are many. Among them are the political thought that I mentioned earlier, how the nature of politics and, you know, how people try to get power, how people try to stay in power. So political thought is important. Philosophy, I mentioned Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. Science, the Greek established some scientific investigations, at least the start of the process. Art, you know, we still look at pictures of the Acropolis and some of the statues that they created, and they're timeless, they're perfect. A little idealized, but perfect. Architecture, I mentioned. Sports. The Greeks' impact on other civilizations definitely includes sports. We still do the Olympics. We have certain ideals. We revere people that are skilled athletically. And I think you could trace that all the way back to the Greeks. And that's important too. Let's take this time right now to talk about Roman contributions to other civilizations. The Republican form of government, the form of government we have in the United States, is important, and that worked really well for Rome, because Rome was a big, big empire, and Republican form of government works well for the United States because we're a large country with 340 million people. So you're trying to bring in as many views as you can when it comes to input on how people want things to be. Roman contributions also has to include the spread of Christianity. Very important. Without a Roman Empire, I don't know if Christianity would have spread and had the influence that it has today. I mean, some people can argue that. And the Roman Empire helped spread Christianity because the Romans were really good at building roads, creating trade networks and stuff. And as we talked about in class, it's not just goods and services that travel these roads, it's ideas. And one of the major ideas that spreads is Christianity. The basic principles of architecture are spread by Roman culture. We still use arches, aqueducts to transport water, just basic civil engineering. Like you could probably look at the Stack in Phoenix where all the overpasses are. And if somebody was an architectural historian, they could look at that and go, oh yeah, that's Roman. That's got a lot of Roman influence there. Plus the use of concrete. The Romans were the first ones to use concrete extensively. The Latin language, definitely a Roman contribution. Latin was for hundreds of years considered to be the language of the educated, the language of science, the language of medicine. And to this day, you go into a doctor's office and you get a diagnosis, and it's not like hurt knee. They'll have something Latin to say about it. The rule of law. The Romans championed the rule of law. Had a profound effect on our history as a nation, the United States, and other nations that developed in Western Europe, that the rule of law was really important. The concept, maybe not the practice, but the concept that there's nobody above the law, and that law needs to be the fundamental basis of any society for that society to work. And I spoke about infrastructure. Okay, we're going to switch gears here. We're going to go to China and talk about Chinese contributions to other civilizations. And there's a boatload of them. Let's go into the boat. Printing is the first one. The Chinese were the first civilization to use movable type. It was not Gutenberg during the Reformation. Go way back beyond that, and it's the Chinese, the first ones to have movable type. Gunpowder. How much has that impacted history? Tremendously, through military stuff. But the Chinese were the first ones to develop gunpowder, and they used it originally for fireworks, which we still use too. Card playing, leisure activity. If a civilization has leisure activities, they're usually doing pretty good because they're not under the gun and they have leisure time. And when you have leisure time, things are doing okay for your civilization. Paper, that makes knowledge a lot more dispensable. Compass, navigation, be able to navigate in the ocean. Silk, the Silk Road, textiles, fine, high desire fabric would be silk back then. The abacus, I don't know if you've ever seen any of them. It's an ancient counting device. It's like a calculator before electricity. The acupuncture, it's a medical method that's still used today, and it's usually pretty successful. The rudder that helps steer ships. Planetarium, the first use, discovery, and look into the heavens and trying to figure out patterns and so forth, where they can actually predict eclipses. Blast furnace. Blast furnace is important because you can make stronger iron and stronger metals. You're going to have distinct advantage over people you're competing with. Porcelain, another big ticket item on the Silk Road, and just China would be a way to describe that. Not only the place it came from, in fact, that's why they call it that, but fine cookware, just high ticket items that it looks really nice. Tea also, a beverage that's still consumed worldwide to these days, and that's a Chinese contribution. I think another really important thing the Chinese did was the concept that people who run the government should be highly skilled and educated and know their stuff. They believe that it should be a meritocracy where people only get jobs by their abilities and their ability to perform well in those jobs, rather than, I know this guy, he's a friend of my son's, I'll give him the job and stuff, instead of somebody who actually deserves the job, who works hard, and has proven themselves skilled in doing that job. Service in the government in Chinese civilization was looked upon in a positive light, that you were really providing an essential service if you worked for the government, and that it was a noble profession and you had a certain amount of esteem and status if you worked for the government back then. And it was looked upon as kind of like your duty of citizenship in a society, that you were not only thinking about yourself, but you were thinking about the group as a whole. That was looked upon as a favorable outcome. That is Unit 1, Geography Foundations of Early Civilization.